Got a job for you, 621. Just get it done. Dispose of you.
God damn it. At least I still have the voice in my head.
You will never burn Rubicon.
Okay, well, at least I still have...
Well, well. I've been waiting for this freelancer.
No, not you. I don't want you. Bring me back to my hangar. Armored Core 621. What a game. As someone who isn't the target audience of these titles, I had a very enjoyable time on Rubicon. This was my very first mecha game, and I'm not counting the one I played as a kid at my old dentist office. Yeah, believe it or not, my old dentist office had a Gundam game. Anyways, I do have some thoughts to share, so let's just skip the rest of this briefing and just sorti. The world of Rubicon is quite tragic, due to an event called the Fires of Ibis. The archive logs hidden within missions reveal that the Coral War that we participate in all started because the mercenary group Branch leaked info of coral abundance on the planet. I don't exactly understand the true intent or symbolism behind Branch's motives though. Their only canonical appearances during the Dam mission, and they only collaborated with the Corps to explicitly lure us out, which is why the real Raven also arrives to ambush us. It's a very mysterious group because they're described as hacktivists, so they could perhaps be ex-dozers, RAD, maybe even Overseer. And of course they're also anti-PCA, which, I mean, who isn't in the game? So perhaps each member comes from a unique past faction, and their end goal is to either destroy Rubicon by initiating the Coral War, or they're simply nihilistic? I'll get to my thoughts on the story, but I'm really interested in the exposition of the game's setting. And I want to talk about the last 4 arena matches, which are Raven, Rusty, Walter, and Air. I believe there is great significance to these 4 being listed as the last group, and I want to quickly talk about their connections to All Mind and Rubicon. Raven, the real one, is first found assumed dead during the first mission. The PCA seemingly got to him, since 621 is ambushed by a PCA helicopter, the same type that later ambushes us on the Xylem. Raven's past and the identity of what a Raven symbolizes is a topic of its own that I won't elaborate on because it's quite easy to find that information if you just play the game. But I believe that Branch Raven's goal was to lure both the PCA and the corporations to the planet, let them then destroy each other, and then have Branch eliminate the residual faction to liberate Rubicon from any further threat. What I believe is that Branch Raven was recruited by All Mind as their goals aligned in liberating the Coral. That all ended, of course, when 621 single-handedly eliminated Branch and all of its members, setting All Mind back on a candidate. Rusty is the next, and he's the most interesting to me. By the end of the second playthrough, players have figured out that Rusty is a double agent with allegiances to the RLF, infiltrating the Arquebus Vespers. However, after eliminating V3 O'Keefe, he mentions Rusty. V3 was an ex-All Mind member, but I also believe that Rusty is an All Mind member as well. The reason for this is because he becomes quite friendly to the player after Operation Wall Climber. It's almost as if he knows who Raven is, as Walter suspects. But it's not 621 Raven that Rusty knows, it's Branch Raven. This confusion in identity makes sense, as Rusty is acquainting himself with another All Mind member for when the Coral release mission begins. Although Rusty's fate remains unknown during the third playthrough, I like to believe that he was absorbed quite like many other fallen ACs during the Coral War into All Mind's system. Walter comes next, and quite like the backstory of the Raven name, I'm not going to go in depth about the Research Institute or about Overseer. My thoughts on Walter in relation to his arena position are that he was identified as a threat by All Mind due to his personal Overseer goal of burning the Coral. What is interesting though is that despite All-Mind being pretty much omniscient in being able to foresee all types of threats, the true unpredictable variable was 621, a hound of no renown and personality who would develop a purpose. They were even able to predict air, which is quite scary given that All-Mind was able to predict her involvement at all in the Coral War. This is of course believable because Sula, an All-Mind member, was defending Watchpoint Delta, in which air awakens in. However, once again, 621 does the unpredictable and defeated Sula, bringing yet another threat in the Coral Release mission. It was at this point where I understood that All-Mind, quite literally, had an ultimatum. They had to either recruit 621 Raven or destroy them. In this case, they chose to recruit. And it was the smart choice too, because Air was also within Raven at the time too, so it was a 2-for-1 that they could monitor both of us at the same time. In regards to Air's identity and motives, she's quite complex and mysterious as All-Mind, and to be honest, I'm not too certain on what she is exactly. I'm saying so much just to get to the story, but that covers the arena matches and the significance that I believe it has on setting the stage of the Coral War. So, now we're in the present day. The corporations are moving in for greed purposes. Walter dispatches 621 to Rubicon for his personal plans of locating and destroying the coral at its core. You know, when I really think about it, it's video game logic of course, but it's pure chance that 621 locates Branch Raven's ID. I did find it strange that Walter wasn't aware of Branch or of the Raven symbolism, but then again, Branch's actions acted in favor of Walter's purpose, and independent mercenaries are all the same to him, so perhaps he paid it no mind. Chapter 1 is all about proving yourself to the corporations and gaining their favor for future jobs. I really enjoyed the concept of professional operations and conduct in the game. Every character has a fundamental understanding of who your allies and enemies are in each mission, but it's just for this mission. Everyone knows that on Rubicon, anyone can be your enemy, and that today's ally can be tomorrow's enemy, or the other way around. I also really enjoyed the personality that came from the VA work of the characters. I never thought I'd be invested in literal radio chatter profile emblems, but I was. My personal highlights have to be Gun 1 Michigan and V, whatever number he steals, Pater. Chapter 2 is the tourist arc, where you get to learn all about how not to die, at least for me. It's actually quite a small chapter, but the boss diversity was nice, with the cleaner and the spider. It was at this time that I really came to love the simple and swift nature that the game took on level design and structure. Missions are quite detailed in their environments, but still have a limited play area so you can focus on the objective and easily hunt for hidden logs, chests, or archives. It's also where I learned how to properly pilot my damn AC in my own time. Chapter 3 is the PCA arc, and for me, was the climax of the story. At this point of the game, I had a pretty good understanding of both Balaam and Arquebus. Balaam was more manufacturing heavy, in which they had a wide range of MTs and weaponry, whereas Arquebus had quality and a more elite force with the Vespers. Both had their strengths, and it was very cinema to see so many characters partake in the Iceworm operation. Chapter 4 then followed suit quite quickly, given it was right after the Iceworm operation. The reason why is because there's a bit of a time skip in which Arquebus dominates the Coral War, because they acquired PCA tech. This is when I felt my decisions started to matter, as I was eliminating characters that I've come to know or that I've heard about, and of course getting re-educated by Arquebus, or destroying them in the third playthrough. Come to think of it, I think V2 Snail has the most possible battle encounters and missions. You can fight him 3 times, once as an optional target when you're eliminating Carla, the second is when he pilots the Balteus, and the third is when you ambush him in this— wait, actually he's probably tied with Iguazu. Oh my god, I don't even want to talk about him, so I won't. until later. I'm not talking about fucking Iguazu, man. Chapter 5 then begins 2 different ways, actually, depending on your decisions. The Fires of Raven is still my favorite ending, just because a clean slate is something I believe Rubicon needs. The past is in fact not a ghost, and the planet would have continued to be exploited even after the Liberator ending. More corporations would eventually make their entrance, and another Coral War would begin. As for the All Mind ending, I'm still figuring some pieces out, which is why I'm glad I voiced my expositional thoughts on All Mind's setup and its key players before I got here. As we move on, I want to make 2 distinctions. The first is that All Mind and Kate Markson have to be the same person, or entity in this case. I don't believe that Kate was ever a real individual or an augmented human. She's simply an AI-controlled AC, similar to Chatty from RAD. Additionally, she doesn't appear in the arena, and Walter doesn't seem to recognize her as a hound or independent mercenary belonging to anyone else. The second is that Air and All Mind are not the same Coral entity. I thought at first that they would be, due to All Mind's Coral release intent being the solution to Air's hopefulness at the end of the Liberation ending. But they are quite different. All Mind is a system that appears to have existed for quite a while, at least before 621 arrives on Rubicon, as All Mind manages the arena rankings in which named characters are ranked before your introduction. If All Mind was a Coral entity, then Air would have also commented on viewing her as a sister of sorts, but it's pretty clear that All Mind is simply an AI that manipulated mercenaries to assist with the Coral Release project. As for All Mind's overall intent or even identity, I don't really know too much about her. She remains a mystery to me. Before I close off this section, I want to address one last concept, and that is the order of All Mind's manipulation. I was interested in establishing this because I think collectively, with what I've said about the exposition, will lead to understand the selection process of candidates. First off was Branch Raven. This one is easy. Due to the Raven ideology, All Mind sold a promising vision of the best outcome possible for Rubicon, and so the Coral War began through Branch. Next off, All Mind needed a corporation to build the vascular plant to act as the source for Coral Release. Arquebus was the target due to their large amount of resources, and V3 O'Keefe was recruited. Not much is known about V3's intent for cooperation, but he did defect after realizing the Coral Release's project's uncertainty, and so he was silenced by you, the player. V4 Rusty and Sula were also recruited at a later time. Now, appealing to V4 was aligning his RLF goals to the Coral Release. V4 agrees, due to spreading Coral equally across the universe relieves Rubicon of corporation intervention. And as for Sula, quite like V3, there's not much info or intent on him. However, Sula seems to have a very long history with Walter that hints to be before the Fires of Ibis. Perhaps Sula too was part of the Rubicon Research Institute, but shares a different vision from Overseer, and so watches over the Watchpoint, ensuring that Air cannot intervene. Alright, I guess now I can talk about Gun 5 Iguazu. By the way, everything I've said up to now has pretty much been speculation on why I think All Mind has decided to recruit all of these different AC pilots. I'm not sure if it's true or not. It probably isn't. It's just a funny headcanon. But I'm gonna do Iguazu's part so quick because, ooh, I don't like the guy. So Iguazu naturally gets recruited for the simple reason for another chance to fight 621. I understand that Iguazu is designed to be a foil to the player. Similar to 621, E2 is Gen 4 and is able to hear the Coral voices. However, unlike 621, he denies them and becomes obsessed with killing the player and focusing all his hatred and all the external reasons that he can't achieve anything on you. While I did enjoy the All Mind final fight, it would have been more cinema if the ACs shifted between multiple different pilots. For instance, start with Iguazu, then switch to Sula, V3, V4, and then end with Branch Raven. For the final fight, you clash against a representation of the name you stole, but your victory is your freedom and liberation. Those wings become your own truly. That's at least how I would have liked it. I understand that the game wanted me to develop a sense of rivalry with Iguazu, but to be honest, I really did view him more annoying than tragic. And that's all I have to say about this game's story and world. I know, I said a ton of stuff, and a lot of it's probably not even true, but I had a lot of fun going over the lore, and I didn't even cover everything that I wanted to either. I didn't talk about the Research Institute, I didn't talk about Overseer, Coral even, the most prominent reason that we're all on this planet. I didn't even talk about Coral. I didn't even address RAD or the Dozer faction, the Ibis series, and all the independent mercenaries that play more minor roles. But I did discuss everything critical that I really wanted to look back on, and I'm satisfied and happy that I at least got to experience and discuss my journey with you. Future me, probably. The characters are next, but I wanted to discuss them through the themes and factions of the game. Liberation, freedom, and borrowed purposes are the main subjects that I found when going through all three endings. All characters have their own distinct motives, even if they are shallow. Greed seems to be the underlying factor for the Corps and Mercs. For the RLF, it's freedom and independency. For Overseer, it's destroying the past. And for All Mind, it's uncertainty and new beginnings. For you, the player, though, there isn't a purpose. There is no origin or personal connection to Rubicon, and we aren't even doing it for the money. Other characters are also constantly questioning us as to what drives us. Rusty, Iguazu, Carla, Air, and even the original Raven pose important personal reasons to the player as to why they continue the fight. However, I've come to conclude that none of that matters. On Rubicon, it's very clear that might proves right, and the victor decides the outcome. It's why the Fires ending is my personal favorite. I don't believe that 621 necessarily needs a purpose on Rubicon. With everybody dead, 621 now has the opportunity and freedom to choose for themselves what path and what life to lead. Whether that has purpose or not is up to them. I guess in a sense, I took inspiration from all the different factions and fused them into one. Greed destroyed everybody and ensured that no side won the war. They then earned their freedom, having no more ties to a master. And they quite literally destroyed the past and are now moving towards a new but uncertain beginning. Before I even get to the functions of the game, I have to state that the sound effects in this game are the best that I've experienced in all the video game content that I've played. I'm very impressed, given all the explosions and energy sounds that they were all very well audibly balanced. As for the actual functions of the game, there's a lot to customize and personalize to your style. So let's talk customization first. In regards to AC building, there aren't objective best weapons or parts. I found a lot of enjoyment working from the ground up, quite literally, around my preferred legs and favorite or comfy weaponry. There's excellent quality of life in missions such as checkpoints and the ability to adjust your AC upon death. And unless you're attempting to S-rank missions, there is no penalty or dishonor in death. Nothing permanent is lost upon defeat. And the worst that could happen is that your repair costs are so egregious that you get a negative balance on your mission statement. Learning the game and not being overwhelmed took some time for me with how fast-paced missions are and the amount of variables that are on the screen. But eventually, when you start understanding how FCS and ACS work, knowing your optimal range of doing combat in, and learning when to use Assault Boost, the game feels so smooth because you understand all the capabilities of your custom AC. For personalization, I haven't played a title that has a comprehensive color system since Code Vein, and the decal image editor reminds me of Project Sekai. So I'm no stranger to these elements, and I found that they worked really well in Armored Core 6 too. This game gives you way too many options to store AC data, tons in fact, and not just for builds, but also for fashion. So you don't have to worry about your custom decals disappearing after you switch out parts or switch out a build. And additionally, decals can be shared via codes, so you can browse instead of creating if that's your decision. The only negative but understandable one is that you can't upload images as decals, nor can you attach them onto weapons. AC assembly aside, there is an adequate amount of side content within each mission to discover. Battle logs, chests, and archive entries lie hidden within most missions that you progress through. There's not a lot of them, so it never feels like a chore, and the rewards are typically worth it since you get new parts. Finally, there is of course PvP. It can have the standard net issues such as lag and being hit by attacks that are clearly out of range, but skill will prevail. At least that's what I tell myself. I dived into the nest for a couple sessions just to see the creative ACs that other people made, and I got destroyed. The best I could do was C rank. There is clearly a meta, but there's also some interesting arrangements that I've come across as well. And that is not all for this game. I'm unfortunately not omniscient, so I'm not sure when I'll be releasing this, but Ace and I are planning on playing Armored Core 6 co-op together. We'll be going through the game just the same as it was vanilla for all 3 endings. So with that aside, Umbra is preparing for our trip to the lands between. So I will see you all tomorrow.